Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Winning the Losing Fight. So glad you're here. I'm Troy Green. I've got Mindy Green in the studio again this week.
Hello.
We were sitting here talking about the story that we both read last week about this guy in Tennessee who's chronically homeless, and he is now facing felony charges for, of all things, sleeping in a public park. So, we were sitting here discussing this wore on me all week because for someone who has actually survived, homelessness, I do not understand how filing charges on someone simply for needing a place to sleep, how that's going to help anyone's situation. I mean, for anyone listening to this who has ever been homeless, sleeping in your car or couch surfing or sleeping under bridges, which I've done. I've actually slept in tool sheds behind, people's houses just to get in and out of the weather. And I guess, for this guy, think about that situation. If he was sleeping in, if someone came out and caught me sleeping in their tool shed, I guess technically I've broken the law, right? So, because I'm trespassing, but that's a misdemeanor. But to charge this man with a felony, to me is completely ludicrous.
What crime was committed?
Now it's a crime to sleep in a public park. That's the crime. That's the crime. And Tennessee's not the first state to do this. I think there are 8 or 9 other states who are passing laws like this as a means to somehow combat homelessness. Well, it didn't solve his homeless problem unless we're going to use incarceration as the fix for our homeless crisis. Are we just going to put homeless people in jail? How does that solve the problem? So all it does is move them out of the public. But I mean, now taxpayers, which we're already paying for homelessness, which we'll get into in just a minute, but homeless people do go to jail, right? We talked about this last week.
Yes.
Right. Mindy's a nurse, and we were looking at the weather report that was coming up that we're going to be starting to hit the 100-degree mark here in Oklahoma, and she said we're going to get an influx
of homelessness
in the hospital. Yeah.
Just to get in out of the heat. And the same thing in the winter.
And they do that. They do that with jail too.
Yeah.
They'll go somewhere they know they're not supposed to be, someplace they've already been served, with a trespass warning, and they'll go there. It's freezing cold. The place calls the cops. They go to jail. They got a warm place to sleep for the night. Again, that's on the taxpayers.
Well, they go to whatever resources they have.
Whatever resources are available.
And if there aren't enough shelters,
correct,
or places to go to get warm when it's cold or get cool when it's hot, there's just not the jails and the hospitals,
correct,
for a lot of areas is all that they have.
How do we justify using incarceration as the fix for our housing crisis? This is a housing crisis.
It is a housing crisis.
Not just that, but it's a wage crisis as well. Right now, I don't know this guy's particular situation, and every homeless person has their own story to tell for the reason why they're there.
Yes.
And I'm not saying there aren't people who are there and are comfortable being there, but the majority of them aren't there by their own doings. And I've listened to people talk, and they'll say, "Well, they did this to themselves," and that's not always. Matter of fact, it's probably rarely the case. And a lot of people go through their whole life and never know how close they got to being homeless themselves. Let's take my experience, for example. Okay. I'm 17 years old. I just ran away from a foster home. Number 7, I didn't like the way I was being treated there. And I'm 17. I've just turned 17. Well, the state decides that, you know, that I am old enough and savvy enough to survive, and they are just going to wash their hands of me and release me from state custody. So I literally walked out of a courthouse that day with what clothes I had in a bag and less than $6 in my pocket and literally nowhere to go.
They had provided no resources for you.
None. There was no one said, well, we're done with you, but here, take this and go here and you can sleep here for a week, or these people will help you get a job. There was none of that. Literally none of that. So I walked 10 miles back to, I was still enrolled in school, in high school. So I walked 10, 11, 12 miles, how far it is from where I was back to the small community, rural community where I was enrolled in school. I thought maybe I would have some resources there. I had friends there. And yes, I did get to couch surf a little bit, but parents didn't want me around, right? I was the outcast. I was the person that they didn't want their children around. Dads didn't want me dating their daughters. I mean, I just didn't fit in anywhere. And sure enough, I started finding it really hard, and friends having to face me and say, hey, man, I'm sorry, but my mom says you can't stay here.
Yeah.
You know? And so the last place I tried, once he told me that, I'm like, well, can I stay out there in the tool shed? They weren't using it, and I literally stayed in the tool shed. And it was freezing cold. It was February. There was snow on the ground. So tell me, you know, if you're listening to this and you think you have all the answers about homelessness, or you're one of those people who think that they could just pull themselves up by their bootstraps and get a job and not be homeless anymore, how do you come from that situation to survival, to coming out of homelessness?
Well, it kind of depends on the reason you're homeless in the first place. It could be maybe you lost your job and you haven't been able to find a job. It could be, you know, in not having the job, you can't pay your mortgage or your rent. And then it could be for mental illness and not being able to keep a job for that reason. Any level of instability. For one, now the housing crisis is a huge factor.
It is, but I want to come from where I was at to up, not from up to back down, right? Because yes, you can lose your job, get divorced. I'm going to get there. This is my first time to be homeless, right? Mm-hmm. So, but I want people to understand, how do you come out of my situation? I'm still enrolled in school. The tool shed was too cold. So now I'm sleeping at night in the laundromat, which they don't lock in this. This is back in the 80s, right? And it stayed unlocked around the clock. And I was sleeping in there at night. So again, I had some meals. I had got some meals at a friend's house. And remember, I still had that less than $6 in my pocket. And I'm burning it up in the soda machine and snack machine in this laundromat. And still going to school in the mornings. And I'm getting 2 meals a day there, breakfast and lunch. So again, how do we go from that to not being homeless anymore? And I want to tell this. I want people to hear it. So eventually I had to quit going to school. And that's a long story. That's for another day. Got into an argument with, you know, the principal over my situation. And I had to quit. I needed money to eat on. And so I walked out. There was a highway project coming through this little community. And I walked out there to the main office and begged them for a job. 17 years old. They put me on a steel tying crew, right, with a bunch of immigrants. Hispanic immigrants were doing this job. It's extremely backbreaking. And you're literally bent over at the waist all day tying rebar together with a little piece of wire and this little twisty tool for $4 an hour. It was excruciating. And I did it for 10 days or so. I got my first check, a piece of a check, and that's all I needed. And I headed down to the local cafe. I ate the biggest chicken fried steak they had on the menu and pigged out, you know. But I realized that I couldn't do that work. It was too hard. It was just too hard. And so I walked myself back to, back to bigger town in the county there where I grew up. And I walked back there and started looking for resources there and trying to find work. So, but again, not to drag this out too long, but once I went back to, the town I grew up in, I was back to, if you found a house party you could go to, if you could crash a house party, then you just crashed out there for the night, and you just couch surfed. If that wasn't available, I can't count the times that I slept under an overpass with some older homeless people because, I felt safe with them. They've been out there for a long time, and I still kind of learning the ropes. I'd been taken care of by the state all these years, and all that's over with. It's over, and here I am, this young person trying to figure out how to put life together from nothing. And there are a lot of people like that. So, and again, not to hijack this, but, and I'm trying to make this as quick as I can, but I walk the streets every week asking people for a job. I don't look like I need a job. I look like I need a shower. That's another thing I don't think people realize. How do you get a job when you walk in and ask for a job and you smell like a sewer?
Yeah.
And your clothes are dirty and your hair's greasy. And, who wants to hire you? And then if you get the job, how are you going to maintain the hygiene to keep it if you're living on the street? That's another thing people don't understand.
You just get stuck there.
You're stuck. So, and that's another day, another story. Once I did finally get enough scraped together and got this little 1-bedroom efficiency apartment near the college, and I built my life from that tiny apartment and how hard that was, but that's a whole nother story, right? And because now we're talking about money and the cost of rent versus wages, and we could talk about that all day.
Yes.
So, but it's not that easy, and I don't think people realize. Now, yes, I could have. Did people offer me drugs on the street? Yes, they did. But I was always very anti-drug. I was just one of those guys that just didn't gravitate to that sort of thing. I drank like a fish in high school, most of us did. Us guys would get together for parties and stuff. But, and I drank to keep warm in the wintertime, but I didn't use drugs. But I could have, right? I could have. And some people don't have that wherewithal about them to say no. They just want to escape from their situation. Just get through one more night, however it can. Just make it easier. Make the pain go away. Make the hunger pains go away. Make your freezing bones not freeze anymore. And people don't realize. So now, some people get strung out on drugs, or they get caught shoplifting because they're friggin' hungry.
Yeah.
And so, and that's all people see is what we just got these homeless people. They're all either they're mentally insane or they're just all criminals. No, most of them are a victim of their circumstance, just trying to freaking survive. And people just don't get it. So, but back to what you were saying, like you said, there are a number of reasons to end up that way.
Yes, a number of reasons.
And again, the resources aren't there. Look, I've told this story a gazillion times, or I've said this before. If I go to prison, if I hadn't, gotten the breaks that I got, and there's another story that goes with that, right? That got me into martial arts. That guy invited me into his school one night. I was watching through the window. I'm homeless. And I walked by there several times a week looking for work. And this guy motioned me in one night, and he didn't ask me anything personal. I think he just kind of knew my situation. And he said that he's remodeling, asked me if I knew how to paint. I'm like, sure. And wanted to know if I would help him remodel his school. And he said, you interested in kickboxing? I'm like, sure. Who isn't, He said, well, if you help me, I'll teach you for free. And he said, by the way, if we're here late and you don't want to walk home at night, I got a spare room in the back you could sleep in. He didn't ask me anything else. He just knew. And that got me off the street. And yes, I eventually got a little job down the street bagging groceries at a grocery store and saved my money and got my little apartment. So you got to catch a break here somewhere, but you got to be hustling, right? I was hustling. But my point is, not everybody has that. And like you said, it's about how did you get there? What are you climbing out of? Maybe they have a drinking problem already. Maybe their drinking problem destroyed their marriage. Maybe it destroyed their job. Are the resources there for that? To help them through that. I was talking about prison and I got sidetracked, but had I gone a completely different route, or had I gotten caught the times that I had to shoplift to eat and went to jail, the point is, if I'd gone to prison, there are programs for people coming out of prison that helps them with job training. I know. I have a client right now who the state, we, the taxpayers, paid for him to go to truck driving school so that he could get a job and stay out of prison. Why in the hell aren't we doing that for kids coming out of foster care? Why aren't we doing that for the homeless people who have lost everything, right? And don't have the resources to change their situation? All we do is blame them for their situation. And for most of them, they're not there by their own doing. Or they're there for a mistake that any of us could or have made. Right? And like you said, some are just there because they lost a job. My second bout with this, even though it didn't last as long and it wasn't quite as dramatic, it was dramatic, but it was different. Right? So before we met, right? Mm-hmm. I had just lost my job, which, I had my school open too at the time, because we opened Green Family Martial Arts in 1992. So I had it going. I had a job. Everything was going great. Married, got kids, just bought, a brand new tiny little house, and everything seemed fine. Well, then I lost my job, and then my marriage is starting to crumble. And so she takes off. I've lost my good paying job and I'm back down to making barely over minimum wage. Things are slowing down at the school, so I'm having trouble paying that rent. And I had to move the school into this other building that had cheaper rent so I could try to keep the students I had. That building didn't have a bathroom. So long story short, the house that we just bought ends up getting foreclosed because she's gone. I can't make the mortgage. And I have to move into my karate school, my kickboxing school that doesn't have a bathroom. So I'm back to being homeless again. Almost, right? And having to go down to the local Quick Check to use the bathroom and to a friend's house every morning to take a shower. And I did that for several months until I got another job and finally get some paychecks rolling and try to work my way out of it. When we met.
Did she work back? She didn't work back.
She worked. Yeah, she worked. She worked. But because when we met, my apartment had heavy furniture in it, right? Did it? Yeah. My TV was sitting on one of those little plastic milk crates and didn't have a sofa or anything. So, and I had just come out of that, right? Just come out of, living in the back of in the little tiny dressing room of my kickboxing school.
I was a CNA back then,
mm-hmm.
and I lived with a nurse friend of mine
mm-hmm.
with the kiddos. Aline and CJ were little then, and
yeah. So technically, you were homeless too, but you're just shacked up with a friend.
She was.
Was she a coworker?
Yes, she was a nurse, and she felt great empathy for me, having two disabled children.
Yeah.
And trying to live off of what a CNA makes.
Right.
This was before I went to nursing school. And
what if you'd lost your job though? I mean, what if you hadn't met her? And even if you hadn't lost your job, you know, being able to survive on CNA's pay with 2 kids with disabilities and trying to find a place to live is difficult. So let's go back to the guy in Tennessee who now is facing felony charges, and look at the challenges this makes for him. Now, most places won't rent to you if you have a felony, right?
Right.
Most places won't hire you if you have a felony. And if he does find a job, is it going to be one that pays enough for him to get out of his situation? So all the state now has done is compounded this guy's issues rather than trying to find a way to help him. So, and I'm sure that, you know, people are going to say, well, you know, you're so smart. What's your big fix for this? You know, I wanted to have this conversation so people would understand that, you know, the misconception, the stereotype about all homeless people being, you know, having mental health issues. Maybe maybe the mental health issues put them on the street, and I've seen that happen. It's people with schizophrenia and different things. They may be a veteran. You know how many veterans I've dealt with in my years in law enforcement? I've had who have been EOD'd, who I've had to transport to a mental health facility, who are veterans, and they're friggin' homeless because we're not taking care of them, right? So there's so many reasons, and all the general public sees when they drive by the corner is somebody standing there holding a sign, and they're like, well, "Why don't you get a job, you lazy asshole?" Instead of going, "Hey, what's your, you know, what happened to you?"
Yeah, that's an important
And they may
question.
learn that this person served, you know, 10 years in the military, and it's not being taken care of.
And they have mental illness due to that.
Maybe starts with PTSD.
And then no family to support.
No, yeah, a lot of times they're estranged from from family. So there's just so many layers to it, and it's sad that we live in a society now where people are so afraid to help that person for fear that they don't deserve it.
That's insane.
How disgusting is that?
That's very disgusting.
And now we've got states passing laws to put people in jail instead of finding ways to fund resources to actually help them. And think about this. We talked about this before. The average cost the taxpayer pays for a homeless person on average is about $38,000 a year. That's what we pay for them to be homeless. That's trips to the ER you're experiencing now. There are trips to jail, having to house them. Tax dollars pay for our jails.
Yes.
Wraparound services, clinics and shelters and keeping things like that open for them. So, but if we spent it's estimated that we could house them for $10,000 a year, each person. So, and if we create the resources to get them on their feet and they get a job, guess what they're doing? Paying taxes.
Yeah.
They've now become a productive member of society again. So it seems backwards to me. It's ass backwards, and I just don't understand it. But, if we want to look at, services that can help, how do we change it? We were talking, I made a little video on TikTok about this very thing. People were talking about, these old, dilapidated, and empty malls. Malls were a big thing back when we were young, and a lot of them are sitting there empty. Why can't they be converted? There are a lot of old, empty commercial buildings that could be converted. We don't necessarily have to build things. Yeah. The structures are there, and there just has to be more that we can do.
Well, the research shows too that the strongest communities are those who help their most vulnerable.
Correct.
And
Correct.
And if you start there, and that's how you build a strong community.
Yes, taking care of those who can't take care of themselves. And heaven forbid, there's going to be, there's going to be someone, listen to this, and who a year from now, they may be a victim of it. Their whole life may crumble, and a lot of people have friends and have resources, have a network of people where they can reach out and get help. Not everybody has that.
No, they don't.
And trust me, I learned early on, at 17 years old, that, you learn real quick how few resources you have when you're completely dependent on other people. So, and again, I could have gone a totally different direction back then, but again, I just wanted people to understand that there's so many reasons that people end up homeless, and we've got to try to find a way to give them the consideration that it could happen to us too.
It could. And so all the reasons that people become homeless, those are going to be resources that need to be set up, like detox, low-income housing, medical care, and overall all these things, and mental health assistance. All of these things are still cheaper setting these things up.
Well, if we had universal health care, it would at least take care of that part. And to me, mental health is health care, period.
It is.
I don't understand why it's looked at as two different things.
It's health care. So,
that would be one thing that would help. But we've got to get people in off the streets. And again, this guy was sleeping in a public park. You have to sleep. It's going to happen somewhere, right?
Yeah.
And I don't know where they're supposed to sleep. I don't get it. So anyway, love to hear you guys' thoughts on all this. And it's a very layered, it's very layered, as you know. I mean, we're talking about people who've lost a job, they've gotten divorced, they just don't have the social structure around them. Veterans with PTSD, family members escaping domestic violence. That's a huge one. When you've got a young woman and she's got children, and look, this happens to men too. As a matter of fact, like I said, after my divorce, after my first marriage failed, I didn't have all the resources that I thought I had. I had friends, but they had families, I had wife and children, and I didn't want to, I was pretty prideful, and I didn't want to, impose on people's lives. It's a very hard thing to deal with and to face. People with schizophrenia is another one. Our children, for crying out loud, we have two children with Williams syndrome, and if something happens to us and the resources fail, where do they end up?
Yeah.
They may end up on the street. We don't know.
They couldn't care for themselves in any way.
They cannot care for themselves. And Alina's schizophrenic, and she's so heavily medicated that, people just don't realize. And it's not their fault. They were born, with
the disabilities.
With their disabilities. And it's not their fault.
And there are many.
And like I said, when we're gone and there's no one to look out for them, we can only hope that the state takes good care of them. That they, and our children our other children help to take care of them. Yeah. But there are people who don't always have that. Yeah. That's what I'm saying. So be courteous and, try to look at things in that, I tell people on my team all the time, the only difference between, my recovery team, the only difference between us and them, if we're talking about the criminals or bad guys or whatever. And I'm going to do an episode and talk about the bail industry, bail enforcement, bounty hunting, all that stuff. But the only difference between us and them is that they got caught. We've all done something that we probably shouldn't have done. And we've all been in a situation where, we could be homeless. But luckily for us, we had a family member or a friend or somebody to help keep us off the street. Not everybody has that. So
that's what we're discussing, and that more people should consider.
I think people...
And then, too, going deeper than that and asking how they ended up there, why, and so you can understand better.
Well, sadly, some people think that, well, that's your fault, you know.
Without even asking.
It's your fault. Well, some people don't give people the courtesy that they got when they were younger. They got, you know, messed up on drugs and couldn't get off of them, and that put them on the street. So it's your fault. You did it to yourself. Get yourself out of it.
Yeah.
You know, well, that's easy to say.
That's a very shallow.
It's a very shallow, yes, very shallow way to look at it, for sure. And I bet you half the people who look down on those folks have somebody in their family that has a drinking problem or a drug abuse problem.
Or mental.
Or a mental health issue, for sure. Yep.
Yeah,
We're real good at pointing our finger at that person across the street instead of looking ourselves in the mirror.
Yeah.
Right? Looking inward's the hardest thing, guys. It's the hardest thing to do. But we want to talk about this today and hopefully give a different perspective and, talk a little bit about, my situation as a young person and having to face homelessness. It's not always as easy as you might think to come out of it. And I hope this helped get you thinking a little bit more about it and asking different questions. Feel free to reach out anytime. Don't forget to give us a follow on social media and, subscribe to our channel on YouTube at Winning the Losing Fight. Thank you guys so much for being here. We'll see what next week brings. I'm not quite sure what we've got. We've got a few things we're working on, and we'll see what happens next week and trying to get some other people in the studio. But thank you so much for being here. We will see you next time.
See you next time.